Welcome to Maddie's World. Enter the world of networking, technology and gaming.
Sounds good, guys. So we have gone through a couple of things, right? What we should be knowing about the spot instances, saving plans, reserve instances, dedicated host instances, and capacity planning. So let's quickly create one another instance. So just to deep dive in that. So you are already familiar with these things. So I'm going to select my RHEL 8 image here. I'm going to choose the general purpose configure instances. So you guys know about the spot instances right now, right? Even if you see here, this shows you the hourly cost here of this for the spot instances, right? So this is the current price, right? If you just match what is the exact price of it and start doing bidding here. So next you see here the networking part, which we by default launching in the default VPC. So I'll let you know how to create the VPC and launch instance on our custom network. The next you see here the subnet, right? By default, the default VPC has couple of subnets here. These are called the availability zones. Also you can see the data centers, right? So you can select here which subnet you are going to launch your instances, or if you do not want to select anything, so you can say no preferences. Assign public IP. So by default it will assign one public IP to your instance. If you don't want it, you can disable it, right? If you use the use subnet setting enable, then it will assign a public IP to your instance. So the next is a placement group, right? One of the essential thing to know, right? What is placement group? Anyone has any idea about it? Placement group is, it may be the increase your performance. It can be to secure your infrastructure from you can say network failure and any of the disaster, right? So there are three kind of placement groups which are available for us, right? So you can give any name to your add to an existing placement group or a new group. Let's say you can give any name to this, right? I would say test placement group. When I go here, we get three option here: placement group strategy, right? That this is what I was talking about. I asked you guys to go for hunting, right? Then we're gonna make this strategy here, right? We're gonna make the cluster strategy, or we're gonna make the spread strategy, or we're gonna make the partitioning strategy. So if you click here, you will see all three strategy available here, right? The first called the cluster strategy, right? The strategy of the placement group determines how the instances are placed on underlying hardware. A cluster placement group cluster instance into the low latency group in a single availability zone. अगर आप cluster strategy use करो तो that means कि those will be in the single availability zone. That means अगर आपकी कोई application ऐसी low latency application है, you do not want you want the higher performance, then you can go ahead with that, right? Your application could interact quickly with each other. So I'm not sure if this is not available for us because this is the free tier one. And if you see here, spread and partitions, two are available for us. That means you can launch up to 7 instances into the placement group. So when I talk about spread, right? What is that? A partitioning placement group spread instance across the logical partitioning. That means what it is doing is, instead of putting those in one availability zone, it is spreading your instance in the logical partitions, ensuring that instance in one partition do not share underlying hardware with the instance in the other partition, right? तो यहाँ पर क्या हो रहा है, जो भी आपके लॉजिकल पार्टीशंस हैं, ठीक है, दिस विल मेक श्योर कि one partition do not share the underlying hardware with the instance in the other partition. Let's say आपने spread instance use किया, right? You use the this you can say strategy here, right? तो यहाँ पर क्या होगा, it will make sure, right, कि जो भी आपके इंस्टेंसेस लॉन्च हो रहे हैं, दे आर नॉट बीइंग लॉन्च इन द सेम लॉजिकल वॉल्यूम, वो डिफरेंट डिफरेंट लॉजिकल वॉल्यूम्स में लॉन्च होंगे। इन केस इवन इफ वन रैक गोज डाउन, एक आपकी रैक डाउन चली जाती, इवन इफ यू विल सर्वाइव, your machines will survive in another region, I mean in another logical partitions, right? In the same way you have a partition one, right? So in partition one is the similar kind of things, right? Let me put it here. A partition placement group spread instance across the logical partitions. I think I mashed up these things. So when I talk about the spread one, this is just spreading, this is just saving you from the rack chassis or rack failure also, right? This is just spreading your instances in more than one rack. Even one rack goes down, even you survive. But when we talk about the partitioning, it is basically placing your instances in more than one logical partitioning, even if one of the failure do not impact the another. तो आप जितने भी इंस्टेंसेस प्लेसमेंट ग्रुप में करोगे वो अलग अलग पार्टीशंस पे, अलग अलग लॉजिकल पार्टीशंस पे डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हो जाएंगे. अगेन ऑर्डर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, और you want to set the distribution. Let's say we're going to do the order distribution here, right? Capacity reservation, we have not done any capacity reservation, we talk about, right? The next is IAM role, we will talk about security policies. Shutdown behavior, whenever you shut down it, do you want to shut down and terminate? So whatever you want. Stop hibernate behavior, enable the hibernation as an additional stop behavior, and if you want, whenever you stop it, it should be hibernate, you can do that. Enable termination protection, right? If you enable it, then nobody will be able to delete it until and unless you do not remove this protection, right? If you want to protect this, so make sure you put it here. No one from administrator or you will be able to remove that instance. If you want to enable the monitoring, go ahead and click here. So it will automatically add it to monitoring, but it will apply some additional charges. We will discuss about the monitoring later on. The next is tenancy, right? The tenancy means how you are going to place your VM. Are you going to place your VM in the shared hardware? That will have less cost. If you want a dedicated instances, then it will be bit costly for you, but will launch your instance in the dedicated hardware, right? Dedicated host, right? This is basically, instance, launch this instance on the dedicated host, right? If you want to launch any dedicated instance in dedicated host, then you'll have to use this one, right? We was talking about, if you remember. The next is elastic interface. Add an elastic interface accelerator. If you want to add some elastic interface, provides cost efficient hardware acceleration for deep learning interface for all EC2 instance type at fraction of the cost of standard GPU instances. So if you want this elastic interface, you can add it. This is cost efficient hardware acceleration for deep learning. All right. The next is T2 and T3 unlimited. That means what kind of instance you are using, right? But anyhow, कभी ऐसा होता है आपका कि आपकी CPU यूटिलाइजेशन बढ़ जाता है, आपका मेमोरी यूटिलाइजेशन बढ़ जाता है. In that case, your instance will go down, your application will go down. If you use this here, if you enable this, there will be some additional charge for this. But if in case you need more CPU, more memory, then whatever the capacity your instance has, that can burst up to that, right? अगर मैं कहता हूँ कि मैंने 1 GB का एक GB मेमोरी का और कुछ दो वर्चुअल CPU लगाए हुए हैं, but sometime I need some more CPU and RAM, then that can go beyond it, but there will be additional charge of that, right? If you see here, enable T2 T3 ultimate allows application to burst beyond the baseline as long as need at any time if the average CPU utilization of the instance is at or below the baseline, the hourly instance price automatically covers all uses. So anyhow, that's good. If you want to add some additional file system, you can go ahead and create it. If you want to add some metadata section here, if you want to execute some command, if you want to install something, you can go ahead and put it here. Go ahead and add storage. So I'm going with the default storage now. We will discuss about it. Tag, I will call it placement 2. Security group, I am going to take the default one at this moment. I'll launch my instance quickly. It says the request information currently not supported. Please check the documentation for a supported configuration. I think this is not supporting our placement group. Maybe initial launch, retry. You can see this has been launched in the placement group. So by mistake I selected the dedicated host. So that's what I was getting that error. Right now, if you see, my instance has been, placement 2 has been launched on the placement group. Right, if you see, come down and see the status here, you will be able to see the detail here itself. Come down, so you can see this is the placement group and the partition number is 1, right, where your VM has been launched. In the same way, if you launch another VM, right, so if you want, that tenancy should be available for you, so go ahead and add the placement group, add to existing placement group. So you'll have to select your group here, which is partitioning 1, right, and create your instances. So I'm gonna go with the default things now. So this is how you can launch your instances in the placement group, anyhow, which can be useful for you, right? Depending on the scenarios, you can use them where you need performance, you need to save your VMs from the rack failure, save them from the rack failures as well. So you can use the placement group in places. So you can see still those instances are launching. So both are running, and if you come down and see the placement group, it also says the partition number 1, right? So anyhow, this can be useful in some of the cases. So make sure you are doing the practice of these all.